Blog Talk Radio.
This is Progressive Conservatism, therapy for the partisan soul. My name is Mark Radulich, your political shrink, here to provide you with insight and guide you into the next week. And no, I do not charge by the hour.
Wah-wah.
Not yet, at least. We have a great show lined up for you today. We're going to talk about House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and her first 100 hours in Congress starting January 4th, what she plans to do with her newfound power. From there on, we're going to do Barack Obama versus Hillary Clinton in the 2008 race. There are some interesting things going on with the entry of Barack Obama. Hillary, not the shoo-in we thought she was going to be, apparently. So we're going to examine that issue. And if there's time, because we've got quite the loaded show today, if there is time, we will delve right into exactly what are the similarities between Iranian President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad and Britney Spears. Yes, there is a connection there, and we will examine it closely, because that is what we do here, turning all kinds of rocks over to see just what we can find in odd places. First, let's give out the number if you want to call into the show, and this is a live call-in show. If you were listening at 12:30 this fine Sunday afternoon, you can call in, speak about any subject that we are speaking about at that time. If you want to add something new to the conversation, that's okay, too. The number is 646-915-8862. Again, the number to call in and give your opinions or insults or whatever you've got going on in your day, 646-915-8862. If you want to contact me by AOL Instant Messenger, you can do that with Mark Kind, 1976, MARKKIND 1976. That's AOL Instant Messenger. At this time, I'm going to bring in my man, the Reverend John. How's it going today, John?
It's going good, and I will make it a point to make sure there's time at the end of the show to talk about Britney Spears.
Of all the things going on in today's world, John, what is the most important issue to you?
Well, what is the most important issue to me? In all honesty, the fantasy football playoffs.
Well, jeez. Okay, well, that we're not going to talk about today. But let you all know a little bit about how we put together the show throughout the week. Especially when I first started about a month ago. Monday morning, I would write my blog Sunday night. Monday, I would get up and I would check to see if all the places that I had put up my blog, if I'd gotten any comments or any feedback. I'd check my email, and then I would go through different news boards. I would go to the Drudge Report. I would check out 411, which is a place where I submit my articles. I would Google news search certain key terms such as Russia, Iran, China, WTO, which stands for World Trade Organization, if you didn't already know that. And I would gather up as much news as I could, and then I would start making piles. As my wife can attest to, the piles grew very quickly exponentially. I was leaving piles everywhere. And I would try to sort through these, piles, and I would also then forward them to the Reverend. And we would kibitz throughout the week, and we would plan out the show. And I got to tell you, this last week, for the life of me, I could not wrap my head around what I was going to talk about. And while I was looking for news, and this is actually when I first started checking out different sites where I could find some news that not everybody in the political sphere was talking about, I came across probably the world's greatest site for obscure news I've ever seen, and I have seen some bizarre ones. With the amount of blogs that are out there, and just the wait for it. With the amount of blogs that are out there, and the way the internet has grown as far as access to news, you would think that there are definitely some niche news sites, but this one, in my opinion, and it was close, took the cake. www.worldpoultry.net, or as I will now dub it, the Report. One more time, John. 1, 2, 3. But it's not all chicken noises here, folks. WorldPoultry.net actually is a great source, oddly enough. Cut it out. Because I had no idea that Poultry was such a hot news item that it needed its own website. What brought me here in the first place, and I do want to share this with you. I don't want to just make noises all morning. But there's an article here that was actually, again, about Russia and the World Trade Organization. Russia, having dumped communism many, many years ago, trying to install sort of a quasi-fascist capitalist regime where you can buy and sell and do all of that, and there isn't central planning as there used to be, just no civil liberties. That's pretty much the way Russia is working, much like China. In any case, they're trying to get into the World Trade Organization to increase the size of their economy. And so we have this article from black.net, and it's U.S. and Russia agree on WTO entry rules. The Office of the U.S. Trade Representative has announced that the U.S. and Russia have come to an agreement on market access issues, enabling the U.S. to support Russia's entry into the World Trade Organization. This was actually as of November 13th. But U.S. and Russian officials expect to sign the agreement at the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation meeting in Hanoi, Vietnam. Now, this is the crux of it right here. Bill Radulich, a vice president of the National Council, said that poultry producers are pleased with the agreement. Russia is the biggest export market for U.S. poultry. But Russian and U.S. officials have disagreed over animal health and sanitation standards. So you see, Russia banned imports from the U.S. after a low pathogenic strain of bird flu was found in several states. Yes, we had actually bird flu here in the United States. Some commentators called the import ban the trump card in the WTO entry into negotiations. That ban was lifted last month. So poultry is now flying free into Russia, and that is one of the last stumbling blocks left for Russia to get into the world WTO.
Does poultry even fly?
Short distances, kind of like a hop.
Okay.
Like the Incredible Hulk couldn't fly either, but if he leapt, he would soar through the air for a good long time. That's kind of like the chicken.
Yeah, I guess I know that. All I know about poultry is that they walk around, they make a good Thanksgiving dinner.
They do make a good dinner. Just to close up on this, the last stumbling block, I think, for Russia to get into the WTO is bilateral trade with Georgia, which they're still disputing. But I think
the state of Georgia?
No, not the state of Georgia. The former Soviet Republic of Georgia.
Oh, okay.
All right, so enough of this. And every week I will update you on what's going on. Wait for it. In the world of black. So stay tuned for more of the black report.
Oh God, it took us a couple of weeks, but we finally got lowbrow.
We finally did what?
We finally got lowbrow.
Yes, at least we're making the sounds instead of having the archetypical producer with crazy wacky sounds, and it turns into, what was it, B-Rye and the Baby?
Yeah, but that's only because we don't have access to those sounds.
I would like to think that we have some restraint.
Nah.
All right, let's get to business. I know this was hot on your agenda to talk about. From the Christian Science Monitor, and after the show,
actually, it was on the Associated Press.
Yes, it was the site that I'm pulling it from is the Christian Science Monitor, but it was an Associated Press article originally. And after the show, all of the articles that I'm using, including from the worldpoultry.net, we will repost on markradulich.com, progressiveconservatism.blogspot.com. But let's get to it. Democrats plan heavy early agenda. Shortly, about 2 minutes after the Democrats took the House on Election Day, they were already rolling out articles on what Nancy Pelosi, incoming House Speaker, was going to do in the first 100 hours of Democrat-controlled Congress. And so the article says, incoming House Speaker Nancy Pelosi has told fellow Democrats she wants to pass the party's 6 top legislative items and toughen ethics rules before President Bush delivers his State of the Union address. The president's speech is tentatively scheduled for January 23rd, meaning that Pelosi and the new Democratic majority would have less than 3 weeks to pass the bills that formed the core of the party's campaign platform. So right now, Congress is out of session, and they don't go back in until a little bit after New Year's, I believe January 4th. And so between January 4th and January 23rd, they want to roll out very quickly some items that already President Bush has said that for the more or less the Democrats were not the stumbling block to, or B, something that he could go along with without completely flailing his integrity upon a sword. The article goes on to say that the measures would raise the minimum wage, expand the opportunity for federally funded research on embryonic stem cells, and permit, but not require, the government to negotiate for lower Medicare drug prices with pharmaceutical companies. Democrats also intend to repeal an unspecified series of energy company tax breaks, implement the recommendations of the commission that investigated the terrorist attacks of 9/11, 2001, and reduce the cost of student loans. All right, let's tackle the first one here, John. Minimum wage. They want to raise it from $5.15 to $7.25. And I'll tell you, just to start off with, why, and this isn't necessarily conservative in the sense that, well, I don't believe in raising minimum wage at all, and Congress should not have to legislate how businesses pay people. This isn't about that so much as it is having made minimum wage once upon a time. Every time they do this, the cost of living goes up with it, if not more so. So, yes, you're paying me more money. Of course, it's costing me more to live, and therefore washing any raise in the minimum wage whatsoever. Where do you stand on this?
I have a hard time figuring out exactly what raising the minimum wage hopes to accomplish, because, I mean, I know I'm already beyond minimum wage to the fact where I just make a salary, and I think a lot of families are generally when it comes to minimum wage. You associate it with like college students, high school kids, retirees, people just looking for like second income, and I don't see how raising, I don't see how people from Walmart or Sears need an extra $1 an hour to stock shelves and not help you when you ask them to.
Okay, well, I know what you mean, but explain to everyone else, what do you mean by not help you, not getting an extra $1 to not help you?
Well, I mean, as it is, they're getting paid to provide customer service, and I don't know if any of you have been to the mall lately. Generally, when you ask someone for help, they just, well, maybe, I don't know, or, nah, I can't help you.
Right.
And I don't understand why they need to get paid more money to not do their job.
I think that's the biggest thing here, and I think a lot of people have sort of said the same thing, that you're talking about legislating what businesses do. As I said before, you're saying, by law you have to pay people more money, and in that there's, I think, embedded this belief that, see, the Democrats are looking out for the common man. But I think part of it, why they don't pay people more money, especially in the service industry, is because
they don't need
service help absolutely sucks these days. Very rarely, and we talked about this last week with reference to the value of shopping, you walk into a store, and for whatever the reasons are, mom and pop, big box, whatever the case may be, very rarely do you find somebody interested enough in their job to help that where it would warrant being paid. And I'll tell you, those that do, those that make their sales goals, those that are actually helpful, those that can steer you in the right direction and are product knowledgeable, fine. They pay them more money. They've earned it.
Yeah.
But let that be the arena of the boss or the manager, not Nancy Pelosi.
Yeah. Especially, I mean, I don't know how other states are, but I know in New York the state minimum wage is $6.75, which is about a quarter less than what they want to raise it to. So instead of having people, retail workers and people in New York who are making a decent amount over the federal minimum wage limit, they're just going to be making the minimum wage.
And what doesn't make sense to me, like I said, going back to the issue of where do you stand in the economy once they raise it, is I think if the cost of living plateaued, and we were talking about, an increase in wages such that you have an easier time saving, because I was just reading a report in The Economist. My wife, lovely woman that she is, got me a subscription to The Economist out of the UK for Christmas, early Christmas gift. Right on the cover, they're talking about the falling dollar, which we'll probably get into in later shows. And they're saying that you have a situation where the cost of living continually goes up. Inflation, the Fed chairman was saying, is uncomfortably high. where, so what if you're making all of this, you're making more money, you still can't buy anything. And I think the point that I wanted to make about this was when you hear from the conservative talk show hosts how much the economy is expanding and how all these economic reports are good, and it's not that they're lies, it's that they're misrepresentations according to The Economist. For example, consumer spending is way up, and they're using that as a measure of looking at the expanse of the economy. However, they're doing it on credit.
Yeah.
I speak from experience here.
I think we all can.
I went out and got a series of Christmas gifts today, all on credit, unfortunately. Not on cash. I mean, on cash, I'm not doing as well.
Mm-hmm.
I think if you took credit away from most Americans, myself and my wife included, we would have a very, very hard time making ends meet. A lot of times, it's not even just for superfluous possessions that we find ourselves going to credit, but just to pay bills at times.
Yeah, I mean, I have a friend whose thinking was, because, I mean, he's got some debt, but eventually he accepted the fact that, hey, I'm American, I'm going to have debt, so I just have to manage it.
Right. And that's actually what my wife has been trying to explain to me. She's just like, hey, look, you keep wanting to get to this place where we're going to have no debt or anything else, and it's just not going to happen, babe. Tells me that all the time. She was just like, hey, look, you spend it now, spend the rest of the year paying it off, and and just restart the cycle again. So I
wouldn't take things that far. I mean, if you're in a lot of debt, you have to try.
Well, no, we're not talking about an excessive amount of debt here either.
Okay.
I'm talking about, I think, a little bit of debt. The thing of it is I keep wanting to be an absolutist on this. I want no debt whatsoever outside of the mortgage.
Yeah, you want to be responsible.
And, she was like, no, it's just, well, again, as we were saying before, it really doesn't matter. And I don't make minimum wage. I make well over minimum wage, as you, and it's very hard to make ends meet because the cost of living keeps going up. But the other thing about this is because of credit, among other things, what The Economist was saying was rates in savings have not increased. They've actually decreased. In other words, a survey of savings accounts in America show that people have little to no savings whatsoever. Mm-hmm. And again, financing themselves strictly on credit.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of where something that I make it a point to do is that, I mean, regardless of like how many bills I have to pay or what I have to do, I always put money away anyway. And it's funny because I actually got the idea from the TV show Friends.
As you get most of your good ideas
from pop culture. No, seriously though, there was one episode where, I don't know, one of the broads was like broke and unemployed, and her father had said, well, have you been putting away 10% of your salary every week so that way you had a savings? And I'm thinking, that's actually a good idea.
Yeah, I used to put $100 out of my paycheck into savings, and I think a couple of times I saved, in a very short period of time, I saved over $1,000.
Yeah, I mean, if you keep doing that every week and you just think of yourself, consider your paycheck, you get paid $40 less than you actually do or whatever 10% is, it doesn't affect you all that much, but you still have the savings, and as you're trying to crawl out of debt, you at least feel like you're getting ahead somewhat because you're also saving money.
Right.
Because that's what always killed me is because whenever I would try to, I have whatever credit card debt or whatever's going on, and like whenever I would just about get to the point where I had everything paid off, I had nothing saved up or anything. So if anything else happened, I got screwed again, which has happened a number of times.
Right. So this goes to the issue of how much does Nancy Pelosi wanting to raise the minimum wage from $5.15 to $7.25 really matter in real terms? Are people going to be able to save more money, increase savings accounts? Are they going to be able to pay down debt? No, because the cost of living, as it does, before all of this, the cost of living was growing at an exponential rate versus real wage.
Yeah.
And we're talking about raising minimum wage. We're not talking about, I think if we were talking about a fundamental change in wage rates, across the board, and a decrease in the cost of health care, I might get excited about this. But, you're talking about one fragment of the economy where in the end it's a drop in the bucket and it's really not going to matter so long as cost of living continues to increase so much to the point that it eats up whatever increase you put in the minimum wage.
Yeah, because and the statistics they give where I don't have them in front of me where however many Americans are barely making over the minimum wage, That's including the high school students and the college students and the retirees and the back-to-work moms and people who are just looking for a second job.
Right.
That's not necessarily, families who are trying to scrimp by just barely making minimum wage.
Right. And one of the things, and this is the last comment I'm going to make on this before we move on, a predictor of the increase in the size of the economy and the strength of the economy is home ownership. I mean, you hear the term ownership society bandied about by the Bush administration, especially when they were talking about investment funds for your Social Security. And on $7.25 an hour, you were not going to be part of the ownership society.
No.
You, as head of the household, if you are the head stock person at Walmart and you're making $7.25 an hour, you are not going to come home tomorrow when this, on January 4th, when this gets passed, and say, hey, lady, wife, whoever you are, we can now go buy that house we've been talking about because I make a whole, $2.10 more than I did before.
Yes, you wouldn't even be able to afford a toy house for your 8 kids.
All right, so the next part of this is officials have said in recent days that the stem cell legislation will be virtually identical to the bill Bush vetoed last year.
Which I'm not surprised about.
The president supports federally funded research on only those stem cell lines created before August 9th, 2001, the date of his speech to the nation on the subject. Let me say this. A good book to pick out of the library or from your nearest bookstore, The Republican War on Science, written by a science and health journalist. Not necessarily somebody with a dog in the hunt politically, just somebody who's been writing on science for the past X amount of years, and compiled all this information, wrote a book about exactly how, because of big, capital B, capital I, capital G, interest in business and lobby money and such, the Republican Party has stymied, if not effectively killed, certain scientific endeavors where the government was involved. One of the things that they've chosen to obstruct or just murk up the details of is stem cell research. I remember from what I had read in the book that Bush's main thing was, well, the lines that we already have that are already set up, these stem cell lines, are good enough and we don't need to add more and therefore funding is not necessary. Let this be the province of private enterprise. According to the Republican War on Science, not necessarily the case. The lines that he's talking about, I think half are corrupted. There's plenty of research on this, but essentially he's going on, and I'm not one of these people who every time he opens up his mouth and what he says isn't true, he's going to say, okay, well, you're a liar. I think he gets his information from handlers, and the handlers feed him stuff from the lobbyists, and the lobbyists say, look, see, this is what we think, and this is what we found out, and it's as good a study as anything else. Certainly this is what they've done with global warming, which I want to say to anyone listening, I believe global warming. I believe in it. So please stop sending me in comments on my blog telling me that I'm a shill for the oil industry.
Yes.
But getting back to stem cell research, this nonsense about how the lines currently in use are productive and everything else, I unfortunately for Bush, I think he's getting wrong information, and he's doing two things. One, he's basing his opinion and belief in not federally funding stem cell research on bad information, but he's also pandering to the evangelicals.
Yeah.
I think what you have here is a situation where many politicians, especially that were running in 2000 and probably 2000 and definitely 2004, were saying, look, if we hit these social points, one of which includes stem cell research, you'll get votes from the evangelicals whose pronouncement is all life is precious. So they're anti-abortion, they're anti-stem cell research, and they're anti-anything that involves killing a human life. And you figure without really debating it, I mean, that's a kind of an absolutist position, whether or not you agree or disagree with it. I mean, they're pretty clear. You don't kill anything that's a human life, period, except if they're a criminal, period, end of discussion. And Bush says, fine, I can do that, therefore we won't fund stem cell research. And the thing of it is he's not really doing anything by saying this. He's kind of throwing them a bone and effectively doing nothing. They're not really getting anything for their money. They're just not getting a federal endorsement of embryonic stem cell research. Stem cell research by itself will continue, federally funded, and private institutions that do embryonic stem cell research will continue. So it works the other way as well, where I think, again, much like minimum wage, this is sort of a non-starter, I think, for the Pelosi regime in that, so what if you get this thing passed? It's not like it was illegal prior to, when Bush vetoed it in the first place. It was just not endorsed by the federal government. Where are you on this issue, John?
I don't think it's a non-starter at all.
Okay.
I mean, on the first hand, I thought this was going to be one of the two issues they tackled first in the first place because, you barely had enough. You had just barely enough Republicans voting for it. Right now, I'm wording this wrong. When the president vetoed the bill, it had a strong Republican support on the Senate and strong Republican support in the House, just not enough to override the veto.
Mm-hmm.
But it still has a strong Republican stance in favor of increasing the federal funding. And by making this one of the issues, both sides can say, "Hey, look, we're being bipartisan," because now if the president overrides it, they can, they'll be able to override the veto. And then once they finish saying, "Hey, look, first thing we did was so bipartisan," everyone goes back to hating each other. As far as the specific issue goes, I don't think it's a non-starter at all, because on one hand, I understand some of the people who are against it, where they're saying well, where do we draw the line as far as like quote unquote harvesting human life, and I can appreciate where they're coming from, but we're talking about material that if we don't use it, it's going to get thrown away.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like we're harvesting human body parts and actually harvesting human just for the sake of research. It's stuff that's just going to get thrown out. And, the research could either maybe not help cure all these diseases, but lead us on the way to cure the diseases. But also, it could also help the economy because Fortunately, I left this information in my office, but there are a lot of the companies, the public companies who deal with embryonic stem cell research, their stock prices are really, really low. Like out of the top 10, 8 of them were under $10 a share, and there are a couple that are even under $2 a share. So if you get the federal funding, and that's more money that's going to go into it. I'm not a stock expert, but if people are able to get on the ground floor, they can make more money that way also. So it also helps the economy.
No, I see what you're saying, but I want to go back to your first point about how this initially had enough votes in both the House and the Senate, and it would have passed. They just didn't have enough votes to override a veto. Again, I think we can debate back and forth of the usefulness of federally funded stem cell research versus exclusively private.
Mm-hmm.
But I think when I say a non-starter, I'm talking about this is something to sort of pad the resume of the Democrats in Congress, saying, look what we accomplished. We did this, and aren't we good? And we did this, and aren't we good? You get a lot of political capital by passing stem cell research with secular conservatives, people very similar to our friend Mark,
mm-hmm.
Somebody who very science-based, somewhat socially conservative, but very science-based, and someone who says, let's not muddy up the issues of science with faith. Let's try to keep them, to their exclusive provinces. And some people would argue that you can actually combine the two. But in this case, people like Mark, many people in the United States who might vote conservative on a bevy of other issues will say, look, let's not mess with science, though. Let's not be putting all of our faith-based beliefs in our science legislation. And so the Democrats are not pandering. I think this is genuine, but they're basically saying, hey, look, see, if you vote for us, we've already got a history of doing well by the science. We're going to, these are the people that are going to attempt, one would assume, to do something about global warming. These are people that are going to be very supportive of the Environmental Protection Agency. Mm-hmm. And now they can add stem cell research. We've now federally funded stem cell research. Look how good we are. Not to mention, I think people get the impression, Wall Street may like a Congress that's deadlocked, but I think people want to see things happening in Congress. They want to see people doing something with their vote.
Right, and
so
people, by large, want the increased stem cell funding and the increased stem cell research, so therefore they could say, hey, look, Congress is actually doing something we want.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think it goes beyond how people vote, because, outside of us and, like, the rest of the blogosphere, people could give a damn about conservatives and liberals. They just see, it's like, all right, I don't want my mother having cancer anymore. I don't want my father having Alzheimer's disease anymore.
Right, or my wife, or my children.
Yeah. This party's willing. The people who are in charge right now are willing to do something that we want them to do.
Right. Now, you can get into. I think I always wait for whenever we have these kind of conversations for some very strict conservative to come, or strict liberal to come bashing through my door and say, but. And yes, there's all kinds of data out there that suggests that embryonic stem cell research is not the end-all and be-all. I don't want to get into a sort of John Kerry thing where if we pass stem cell research today, tomorrow Superman will walk.
Yeah, that's idiotic, especially considering he's dead.
We'll bring him back to life, make him walk, and then kill him again.
Yeah.
That sort of thing. That's not going to happen. We're talking about science and discovery and the possibility of cures, not necessarily a locked-in deal that if this happens, this other thing will happen.
Mm-hmm.
I want to stop there, and because we have our first guest ever on Progressive Conservatism. She is Amanda B Carpenter, author of the new book, The Vast Right-Wing Conspiracies Dossier on Hillary Clinton. Amanda, are you there?
Yes, I am. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you for being on, Amanda. How you doing today?
Pretty good. I might sound a little funny. I'm recovering from a cold, so bear with me.
Well, that's okay. Considering the callers I've gotten in the last couple of shows, you fit just right in.
Okay, great.
So tell us a little bit about the book. I've read it, I reviewed it, and posted it on my blog, but what was the reason you decided to write this book?
Well, essentially, you look around at the multitude of other books that are about Hillary Clinton, and when you look at them, you realize that nobody's really covered what she's done on Capitol Hill over the past few years. It's all related to the previous Clinton White House. It's related to sex jokes with her husband. And I really thought, if this woman's serious about running for president, then somebody should be serious about looking at what she's done.
And that's an excellent point. Through reading your book, you do spend an enormous amount of time focusing on her time as a junior senator from New York and exactly what she's done while she's in the Senate, which is impressive because there wasn't that much information collated together in one space. So it's a really great book for people that are wondering, well, what has she done since she's gotten in the Senate, since she's sort of earned this badge of, well, she's a do-nothing, she's just there to run for president.
Yeah,
it really sets that up.
Yeah, thanks. It seems like, so many people in the media, they're so busy, they want to speculate if she's running for president, that she's just really gotten a free pass for what she's done as a senator.
What I'm wondering is, it's rather early before the primary season. The primary season starts January of 2008. What was the reason for the timing of the book now?
Well, the timing of the book now, it came out before her Senate reelection, and although this is more of a 2008 book, why not get it out there early? There's going to be so much information, put it all in one place. I really want it to be more of a, this isn't my opinion piece on Hillary Clinton. I'm a news reporter. If you want to find out what she's done with your taxpayer money, the legislation that she's pushed, what her voting record is, you can really see what you're going to get with her when you look at the dossier.
Yeah, it's a really great resource, sort of as a secondary resource for people who want to go to one space to find what this woman has done. So one of the things I enjoyed about it is that it wasn't a narrative and it wasn't like the 87 other books that are out there.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I read a lot of those books. I just said, I'm a reporter. I don't really care so much that people don't like her. I want to know what she's going to do with my money, how she's going to, as a senator and maybe a president, will put these rules and regulations on me that are going to affect, when I go to the store, when I want to make a purchase. You got to bring it down to that level.
Yeah, exactly. And that brings me to my next question. Your book does focus on what she's done as a senator, and according to you, and what I was reading through your documents that you have reprinted in the book, she has brought an enormous amount of pork to New York State. In some cases, especially I think with the issue regarding 9/11 security funds, she, I think, took advantage of a situation to bring more money into New York and make herself look like she was doing something on security when she wasn't. But I am curious to see what your thoughts on are as far as other senators that equally bring amount of pork to their states. What makes her different than, let's say, Robert Byrd, who I think has half a state named after him?
Yeah, well, I certainly don't approve of Robert Byrd doing it either. I mean, it's interesting because Hillary Clinton really doesn't have any legislative accomplishments. The most thing that she's been most successful in doing is just bringing federal money back to New York, which is good for New Yorkers, but it's not good for the other taxpayers in the other 50 states. And certainly there's a number of other senators that secure earmarks, but just because other people do it doesn't make it all right. If this woman, she wants to bring herself to a national spotlight, let's examine, the pork that she's gotten. Why is there $7 million in community development block grants that are supposed to fund low-income communities going to the county that she resides in that is one of the richest counties in the nation? I mean, that's a valid question. Why is she taking credit for getting that grant money back? Why is Goldman Sachs, which is her number one campaign donor, has given her more than $1 million, makes $43 billion a year. Why did they get $25 million from the Department of Housing and Urban Development? Well, Hillary Clinton's happy to take the credit for it. So, there's a lot of things like that I think are certainly worthy of, getting an answer from.
Yeah, she certainly is a new Democrat as defined by the Clintons, which is to say we're not for the little people and please give us lots of lobby money and big business money and then portray yourself as someone for the people. But,
yeah, certainly. I mean, and you can see all these relationships with, where is her money coming from? Everybody read the stories about how she raised so much money for her Senate election. Well, who's bankrolling Hillary Clinton? Because certainly, those kind of donations come with some type of promise and, some hope that she's going to do something for them later on.
Exactly. Which then brings me to my next question. The Clintons certainly seem to have a long and storied history with the Chinese government, which you allude to in your book. How do you see the relationship playing in Hillary's candidacy in 2008, and God forbid she actually wins the whole thing? How do you see her relationship with the Chinese playing out in the dubbed Clinton co-presidency?
Sure. I mean, this is really interesting. I mean, most people remember Chinagate, what happened the first time around when Hillary Clinton was in the White House, and she was meeting with Chinese people that had tied to the military, and they were essentially paying her debts to the Democratic National Committee. I mean, you had foreign money entering U.S. elections through Hillary Clinton and the First Lady's office. This is all confirmed by House investigation. Now you have the situation where Bill Clinton, since he's left the presidency, we know that he's been traveling. And it's funny, if you look at Hillary Clinton's Senate financial disclosure forms, which I reprint in the back of the book, these are official documents that has her signature on it. What she has to do on these documents is say where Bill Clinton has been earning his money because it's her spouse and they share a joint checking account worth between $5 and $25 million. What Bill Clinton earns is technically, legally, half of her money. So on there you see that Bill Clinton has been taking many trips to China, getting paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to give speeches. There's even one event where he got paid $500,000 for a canceled speech. Now, what makes this even more interesting...
I got paid that kind of money not to go to work one day.
I know. But, I mean, so he's a private citizen. He's allowed to do that. I mean, Ronald Reagan did it before, but when Ronald Reagan did it, he wasn't married to a sitting U.S. senator. And Hillary Clinton can easily transfer that money, since it's her personal money, to use for her election. So, Bill Clinton says, I'll come give a speech for $500,000. That money is able to be used by Hillary Clinton for her 2008 race. It's that simple.
Right, and so as time goes on and he goes back out on tour again, the Clinton, Britney Spears world tour, I'm sure is what's on deck, he can go out and collect enormous sums of money because he does have that kind of status. I believe there's an article, I'm going to talk about it a little bit later, that referred to the two rock stars of the Democratic Party being Bill Clinton and Barack Obama. Mm-hmm. And then that's all money that eventually she's going to tap and use for her own candidacy. And it's something, unfortunately, that other candidates in the Democratic Party like Barack Obama or Al Gore are going to have to contend with.
Right, and I mean, the whole point, one of the biggest reasons we have so much campaign finance regulation is to keep foreign money out of U.S. elections. Now, this is a loophole. I talked to, Senator Russ Feingold, one of the main architects of campaign finance reform, and I said, did you ever consider this scenario where a candidate's spouse could be raising foreign money, dump it into a personal account, and, essentially launder it into a campaign? And he said, no, that's something we've never considered. So, I mean, this is absolutely a loophole, and I interviewed Hillary Clinton, too, about it, and I said, do you have any plans to use your personal money in your upcoming races? This is in October. And she said, I have no idea. And, I mean, she isn't ruling this out.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, it's right in line with the history of what the Clintons have done with foreign money before. So I think it's a huge concern, especially when Bill Clinton's taking money from the United Arab Emirates. I mean, yeah, I really encourage people when they see the book in the bookstore to flip to the back and look at those campaign finance documents first, because that's really the most interesting reading.
Even if you're not a social liberal, somebody that would vote for her because of her social policies, it's a very scary prospect to bring somebody like Hillary Clinton into the White House because of their relationship with the Chinese. I mean, these are people who are full-out backers of the Iranian regime under Ahmadinejad, who, as we all know, is looking for all kinds of ways to destroy Israel. These are people who are in line with the Russians, who are quickly becoming not nearly the powerhouse they were as the Soviet Union, but certainly an economic powerhouse. You have a situation where the Chinese are looking at Venezuela to divest oil from selling it to the United States to them, and so China is going to be a big player. And what I don't want to see a repeat of is, when Clinton was in the White House, we ended up giving technological secrets to the Chinese, and they had leaps and bounds in advancement to the point where they're a challenger as far as national security. I don't want to see a repeat of that again, and I think that's what's in line if Hillary gets elected.
Right, I think you're certainly right. I mean, letting the Clintons back in the White House, and they've already had their chance. We know the history with, this kind of foreign policy, and even, to let Bill Clinton back into the White House as, a first gentleman or whatever role he would be, he doesn't have the best judgment when it comes to this. And I think that would be a huge national security threat. He's already being lobbied by international interests. He's lobbying international interests in his retired role through the Clinton Global Initiative. I mean, he's very active, and I think this would be a huge vulnerability, not only for Hillary, but in any kind of security interest. I mean, people would be scheduling meetings with him while she's doing other things. I really think it would be chaos.
No, absolutely. And their track record, as you pointed out, is abysmal. You have North Korea with nukes. You have China making, again, leaps and bounds.
Well, you know what Bill Clinton...
Excuse me.
You know what Bill Clinton's doing in North Korea now?
What is he doing?
Oh, it's through his Clinton Global Initiative. He got $500,000 through Ted Turner in Daimler Chrysler to build a peace park in the demilitarized zone.
Are you kidding me?
No, I'm not. It's in the book, and you can look on his website, Clinton Global Initiative. I mean, he's raising money to build a peace park there to help spur religious reconciliation. That's how it's spun.
Yes, I'm sure when the South Koreans are trying to figure out what's the best way to pursue reunification and demilitarization of North Korea, they're thinking, let's go to the park.
Right. Well, that's his plan, peace park plan.
That's good. I think that's a great campaign slogan. Hillary Clinton, let's go fly a kite. I've seen you on Hannity and Combs do a great showing, especially when you have Combs asking, I think he's a fair enough reporter for somebody taking a left approach, but he does ask some strange questions. How do you feel being now part of the echelon of popular conservative female journalists in the avenue of Ann Coulter and Laura Ingraham? And added to that, the fact that you now unfortunately will face the wrath that those two have faced.
Well, if the wrath of Alan Combs is the worst I'm going to get, I think I'm going to be fine. But, yeah, it's an honor. I really enjoy what I do. I mean, Human Events is certainly a great place to be for me because, I get to go on Capitol Hill. I get the privilege of being able to say that, yes, I'm a conservative, and this is how I'm going to report. Obviously I'm going to value lower taxes, less regulation. I don't have to go through this dance of trying to be objective. So, I mean, it's really nice, and I do enjoy doing it as a reporter, not just a pundit, because I really think there's a need for that.
And I do enjoy your work in Human Events. I think it's a stellar periodical and something I recommend people listening to the show to read because I do think it's a very fair reporting, and it's unlike the usual mainstays, the Boston Globe and the New York Post. I think the Human Events paper actually gets down to actual reporting instead of editorializing on the news page. Well,
thank you. That's a huge compliment.
What do you think her chances are of winning the first three primaries? And on this show, good old Reverend John and myself feel that after the first three primaries, after South Carolina, it's a done deal. Who's ever won Iowa, New Hampshire, and South Carolina is going to take the nomination for both parties. What do you? And those are three very distinct states: Iowa, New Hampshire, and South Carolina. What do you think her chances of winning the first three are, especially with Barack Obama in the race?
Right. I mean, Obama's certainly putting a wrench in her plans, I think. But I think she's going to be fine. I mean, she hasn't been laying groundwork in Iowa, but her husband has. I mean, he's visited there a few times through October campaign season. He was there twice, giving a major speech for the Jefferson-Jackson dinner and other things like this. So, I mean, people don't realize that he's been doing the work where it's hard for her to do it. He's been going to the red states a lot. And, of course, you know, they love him there. And essentially, you know, he's a great proxy for her because as soon as he gets there, people say, you know, what's Hillary going to do? So, you know, it's going to be tough for her, but she's going to go to Iowa. She's going to talk about energy. She's going to promise them subsidies to try to get ethanol going, and that's going to be what they're going to want to hear. And certainly with Barack Obama, he's a formidable candidate, but he doesn't have the experience that she does, especially on a national campaign. I think foreign policy is going to be a huge thing for the voters this time around, and that's something that he clearly lacks in, being in the Senate only 2 years. So I think she has a lot of vulnerabilities that she can exploit on Barack Obama, quite frankly.
The other big name stake in this election is going to be Al Gore, somebody whom, while I don't necessarily consider myself a liberal on the issue of the environment and global warming, I think Gore makes some very good points. I've said in the past, if he runs on energy policy and the environment, he's got a great chance of knocking Hillary out of the primaries. Where do you see him as a contender for the nomination against her?
Yeah, I mean, he would only have to run on energy issues. I think you're right in that, because if he gets outside of that box, I think then, you know, he's kind of been out of the loop a little bit. He might have done his homework, but I'm not sure that people are going to think he's really a source of credibility, especially national security issues. So if he ran on that ticket, yeah, exactly. Well, I think you'll be surprised. I think Hillary's going to do her homework. It's been rumored that she's going to pick General Wesley Clark as a running mate, which, you know, or some kind of general to give her that backing. So I think that would certainly help her in that respect. But Al Gore, you know, there's this political dynasty problem that I think voters are really frustrated with. That you know, they're both going to have that problem. It's going to be who's going to do a better job of getting around it.
That would certainly give Obama an opportunity to split the middle and run away with the nomination, but I guess that remains to be seen. As far as the national security issue, your book is, just to go back to it, for people to understand what a threat she is, you know, as president of our national security, I think they really need to read your book. Because if she's out there running, you know, doing her homework, as you said, and trying to attend to these issues, let's face it, I think Hillary will say and do anything to get people to vote for her.
Yeah, I mean, most people don't realize. I mean, she did vote for the war, but ever since that vote, she's been obfuscating the record to try to obscure the reasons why she voted to go to war. And I think the biggest thing that hurts her is that, you know, we have the liberals are going to come out and they're going to slam it that Bush lied us into war, just like they did in the winter of last year. And she can't get around the fact that the guy that compiled all the intelligence in her White House, you know, that gave all the intelligence to President Bush was a Clinton appointee. His name is George Tenet. He was appointed by Bill Clinton. He is the one that made the slam dunk case, as chronicled by Bob Woodward. He made that case in the Oval Office to George Bush. So, I mean, there's no way that Bush lied us into war because it was a Clinton guy that gave all the information to Bush. She knows this. And that's why she's not going to be able to go as far left to the anti-war base as like a John Kerry will or even Barack Obama will. So it's going to be a problem for her.
It'll be interesting to see if she'll have the support of the Dean MoveOn.org far left because of that. I mean, these are people who, no matter what the issue is, if we're talking about raising the minimum wage, you're going to run past the camera in a, you know, no blood for oil, free Palestine T-shirt. You know, is she going to make any headway with them who are willing to throw someone like Joe Lieberman, who is not exactly a conservative, over the rails just because the guy standing next to him in his suit said, you know, let's get out of Iraq? It'll be very, very hard for her, I think, to make inroads with those people, like as you said, because she's got a record of voting for the war, unlike John Kerry, who voted for it before he voted against it.
Yeah, I don't think she's going to go to any great lengths to try to meet them because, you know, it hurt her image as, you know, sort of this hawkish woman that is going to be tough on security. And I think she's just going to beat them with the money. I mean, she's laid out such an impressive infrastructure on a national level, you know, in part created from, you know, a team that's already won 2 White Houses in the past. I think she can lock up the money, and essentially the Deniacs are going to have to move to her.
Well, they're not going to have much of a choice because much like the evangelicals voting for Bush, when you've only got two choices, you've really only got one choice.
Right, and I think she knows that.
Do you have time for one question from the Reverend?
Oh, I sure do.
John?
Yeah.
You had a question. You're a New York State resident. I know you had a very specific question about this past election.
Well, yeah, it's not so much that I have a question as much as I was surprised to hear about all this pork she brought to New York because I live in New York, and outside of the fact that she's the former First Lady and has been running for president since 2001, I would have no idea she was my senator.
Well, you don't live in a county where do you live in a really blue liberal county?
No, which would probably explain why. But I also live right outside of I'm on Long Island, so I also live right outside of New York City.
Oh, okay. I know the visits that she has taken to Long Island. She's talked a lot about reducing property taxes. She actually took a stage from the playbook of a former politician. The name's slipping my mind right there, but she did some kind of big event where a bunch of reporters came because actually the Long Island County somewhat resembles Ohio.
Mm-hmm.
From what I've been reading, it's kind of pro-Catholic, kind of a...
Could you repeat that last line? My wife is from Ohio, and she's always telling me how different they are from...
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know, but I've read, in the past that the counties are very similar demographically. And so she's been going
sure you're
there
right. I just want you to rub it in her face.
Well, I don't want to make your wife mad at me.
Okay.
So, she goes there and she talks about property taxes and, reducing the college tuition rate, which, are pretty safe issues. So, but I don't know what else she's done up there.
Yeah. Well, no, that's why it's surprising. She speaks to people that on a national level, but as a New Yorker, she really hasn't told me anything.
Huh.
And I was amazed exactly that she raised more money than any other candidate to run for Senate because I have no idea what she spent it on. There were no commercials for her. There were no signs. She ran against a guy that, had I not been a fan of the West Wing and had a guy with the same name not died, I would have no idea what his name was.
Huh. Well, I know she spent $80,000 in valet parking. There was that one story in the New York Times that kind of went through that I thought was entertaining. But that surprises me.
$80,000 on parking?
Yeah, and $13,000 in flowers. So maybe she's buying that instead of commercial.
Okay, that's good. Maybe she's whatever
that would actually make sense. That actually makes sense to me now.
Okay.
Well, considering the astronomical fees of parking in New York City, that's almost possible.
Yeah, it's like, if you park enough in the right places, I guess you could do it, but just have somebody drop you off.
There you go.
Don't get me wrong. I'm no fan of hers. When I hear about all the money that she's bringing into New York, it was news to me.
This is also interesting. I found in researching. She also spends, I think, $1,300 from her campaign expenses to get her hair cut. So,
well, I'll tell you what, she's made, and you have made this point, and a few other authors have made this point about how important image is to her. So technically, that is a campaign.
Media production.
Exactly.
That's what she called it.
She'll probably bring in Lucas to do her campaign in 2008.
Yeah, why not?
And I also think we're underestimating Barack Obama's ability to rival her as far as raising money goes. Because once, like, Russell Simmons and Jay-Z and P. Diddy
and Ludacris
find out that he's running, the money is becoming hand over fist.
Yeah, those would be much better campaign commercials, wouldn't they?
Yeah, whether or not he's able to get past the national security issue and the fact that he doesn't have much of a record yet, that's to be seen. But as far as raising money goes, he's going to have no problem.
Yeah, he's a smart guy. These are issues he can learn.
Yeah.
But, you make one mistake, like a George Allen, in front of a camera, and then you're toast. But I think Hillary's more vulnerable than Barack Obama in that respect because, she's got that voice. She can get angry. One 30-second clip could really, she could really implode.
Plus, she's already made a few flubs, but the media is so... the mainstream media is so partial to her that outside of strangling a kid on camera, they'll always be there to cover for her. But I do have one last question for you. Who is your pick to win the GOP nomination in 2008? On this show, we're talking McCain, Newt, and Giuliani as the top three. Where do you stand?
I'm just waiting. I'm waiting for someone to emerge that is going to make me really excited. Honestly, it's going to be tough. I was listening to Kellyanne Conway, the pollster, and what she said is essentially, looking at the people we have now, we really, meaning the conservative community and the media, it really needs to be brutal on these guys and make sure that they give answers on the national security, on the spending issues. I mean, like with Romney, like, yeah, he's got, this good health care plan, but, is that something you can do in Massachusetts, but can you do that on a national level without raising taxes? Things like this.
He also doesn't come across very personably, and unfortunately in the American media, if you don't translate through the camera, the average American's not going to pay attention to you.
Yeah, well, if Mitt Romney wasn't good looking, I don't think there'd be any hype, quite frankly. But we're going to have to do our job.
Yeah, I'm pulling for Newt personally. I know John is pulling for Giuliani, and we both have differing issues on these things. But maybe you're right. Maybe somebody will come across and surprise us.
Yeah.
And throw up a real stiff competition to Hillary. I know for a while I was pulling for Condoleezza Rice, but the woman can only tell me no so many times before I go away.
Yeah, I mean, that's not going to happen. I wrote about this on the blog today. I mean, Condoleezza Rice, how could she campaign being the Secretary of Defense? I mean, she's going to put off, Secretary of State. I mean, she's going to put off a meeting with the president of Iraq to go campaign in Iowa. I mean, I don't think that people would even, it would not even be permissible to do, let alone, mount a campaign from that office. It'd be pretty tough.
Well, maybe she'll step down and President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad will come in and be Secretary of State, seeing
the
rhetoric out of his mouth these days.
Aw.
we still have Sam Brown back.
Yeah, he's kicking around there, and Bill Frist is out now too. But I've kind of been hearing some things about Governor Pawlenty. I don't know that much about him. I mean, there's governors still kicking around out there. Mm-hmm. So.
All right, Amanda, thank you for calling into the show. You're a great guest, and I want to recommend once again the Vast Right-Wing Conspiracies Dossier on Hillary Clinton. This is must-read material for the 2008 election. Thanks for coming on, Amanda.
Oh, thanks so much, guys. Bye.
Bye. Okay, John, we have 4 minutes left.
President Ahmadinejad of Britney Spears.
Let's do this real quick.
Okay.
Where are we? Wow, I have to throw out all my material here on Obama and Hillary. Well, we pretty much covered it. But Iran, on MSNBC.com, Iran's leader, letter written with a purpose, and he says in this article that, where is it? There was this line in here. Basically, Ahmadinejad tried to confront the American people via writing a letter, and it's been dubbed sort of a publicity stunt. But there's this bit here at the very end. Ahmadinejad surely had an eye on the Iranian public when he sent a letter trying to show his people he was not just tough but open to talks. He also made genuinely believe he can persuade Americans by force of argument and ideas. He's ignorant of the attitude of the American people toward Iran, said Mustafa Alani, an Iran specialist with the Gulf Research Center in Dubai. He believes the U.S. public opinion will be occupied with his letter and debate it. The Iranian leaders have a huge lack of understanding of American public opinion and what moves it. John, what does move American public opinion?
The self-destruction of Britney Spears.
And can you do that in 1 minute or less?
Okay. My fascination with the self-destruction of Britney Spears. It started because I happened to be watching MTV when they debuted her video for the first time, and I thought to myself, wow, what a bunch of crap. This won't possibly sell. Then a couple years later, when I'm working backstage at Nassau Coliseum as part of her sold-out tour, I was fascinated to, after she thanked me for buying her a Frappuccino, proceeded to then lip-sync during her sound check.
She lip-synced during something else, didn't she?
Yes, and during the show, she lip-synced the patter in between songs, like, hey, it's great to be here.
She had to practice that?
She lip-synced it. End the show.
That's excellent.
So
what's the connection between...
People are more fascinated by the fact that Britney Spears doesn't wear panties than they are about President Abu Dhabi.
Yes, they're more concerned about Britney Spears not wearing underwear and hanging out with Paris Hilton than they are in the president of Iran threatening to annihilate us and Israel.
Who, by the way, would make an excellent candidate for the Green Party.
Yeah, we'll maybe get into this a little bit more next week because we are plumb run out of time. But I'm telling you right now, President Ahmadinejad is looking to the future. He is going to be the next Ralph Nader. And on that note, folks, this has been a great show. Thanks for listening. We will be back next week. Have a good day.
Bye.